All right. So we are going to get started. I just want to thank everyone for joining us for the continuation of the Empowering Every Voice University Life webinar series. And so we are going to really today kind of dive into how can we, in our different roles, whether if we are on a campus level, on a system level, whether if we are SUNY system admin, whether if we're admissions, regardless of our role in our area, how can we be intentional in order how to best support students who are coming from the foster care background. And so before we get started, I'm just going to share my slide. Would I be able to share slides?
Give me 1 second to.
Thank you so much. And then we're going to get started with some introductions as we're doing that. But to introduce myself, I'm Clarissa Hartzog. I'm the Foster Youth College Success Initiative Coordinator, and I'm also the campus liaison to the university centers within the Office of Opportunity Programs. And kind of, again, as we're transitioning, maybe to have our panelists really quickly come on and just share names, faces, so, we all can get acquainted. So whoever wants to go first. How about Deidra? How about you get started? Sorry, I see you first.
No worries. Happy to get us started. Hi, everyone. My name is Deidra Nesbeth. I use she, her, and hers as my pronouns, and I'm the director for the Fostering Youth Success Alliance, which is housed at Children's Aid and is really a space of youth-led advocacy to make sure that young people are supported through their transitions in and out of foster care, but particularly around higher education. And so that's where we have a really deep partnership with SUNY. So we're excited to get to chat with you all some more today.
So thank you, Deidra. And Dylan, if you could go next and just do a quick intro.
Yeah. Hi, folks. My name is Dylan Tatom. I am a lived expert, and I currently serve as the Policy and Advocacy Associate with the Fostering Youth Success Alliance. So this is really a full circle moment for me to really just use my personal experience in the foster care system and pair it with my professional expertise to amplify the voices and needs of young people with a foster care background across New York State. I'm also a former CUNY student, so although this is a SUNY conversation, I'll be able to provide some shared experiences on what young people experience regardless of what region they're located in.
Awesome. Yes, the Children's Aid team, they're definitely rock stars in supporting this population. And last but not least, Tony.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Tony Rivera. I am a foster youth alum as well as a opportunity program alum. I'm here on behalf of my organization, Fostering Minds, and my newly founded nonprofit, the Grateful Guts organization. Looking to close the education gap, trying to, share my experience as part of that 3%, but looking to ways to help the 97% that's not, reaching graduation. I want that number to drop so that 3% can rise.
Thank you, Tony. So I'm gonna really quickly do a shameless plug, whether it's students or just staff and administrators who may or may not know about FYSA. Just let me share that with you all. Hold on. So do you all see my slide by chance? Okay. Okay, awesome. So really quick, I'm not going to go too in depth about FYSA, but I'm going to drop in the chat the digital one-pager that we have. And so for those who might not know about the Foster Youth College Success Initiative program, it was started in 2015. So we are approaching our 10-year anniversary. So we're definitely excited about that. And really looking at how with the program to provide benefits to support foster care, but in addition, students who are orphan or ward of court. just with those list of benefits there. And there's a QR code if there, again, any folks who want to scan it really quickly, but we'll definitely be dropping that in the chat to you also if you want to take the time at your leisure to kind of read through and kind of get more of a robust understanding of FYSA. But always have to, put that in there. And so really quickly, we will be kind of going into just really, like I said, a dialogue prior to our panel discussion, really talking about and thinking about just kind of our webinar focus, which is really the students. And so I'm going to transition and we're going to share a student video. A student, his name is Rowan. He actually earned his bachelor's degree of science in criminal justice and English writing from SUNY Plattsburgh. And so just again, wanting him from his background experience as a foster youth student to really share his story. And so for whoever, again, is doing kind of the technical side, I'll have you momentarily when I kind of give you the cue to just kind of pause the recording, and then we'll kind of resume after, okay? So I'm gonna stop sharing really quickly, and then we will transition. And then in the chat, you should see momentarily, I'm also going to put in the FYSA one page. Oh, so you already did that. Thank you. Right. So I'm going to share the video now. Let me know if you all have, for any reason, can't hear the sound, but you should be right. So for our lovely panelists, for the first question that I have for you is, I did, allude to one of the financial aid options, but what are some other financial aid options and resources that are available to individuals who are coming from a foster care background, who are interested in pursuing college?
So I'm happy to start us off here. And I will repeat FYSA, or the Foster Youth College Success Initiative, as a way to start, really to highlight that came from a lot of youth advocacy as how we got to the place of having that initiative in place. And the difference between FYSA and some of the other financial aid options that we'll talk through really has to do with, it's intended to fill in gaps that will exist at times after a young person is still fully packaged, right? There are things that Rowan spoke some about, wanting that full college experience, right? So maybe it was more helpful to be on campus for different periods of time, or maybe going home for a young person might not be as much of an option. So how are you paying for that intercession housing? When a personal or a medical expense comes up, how are you really being able to fund that? That's a big part of what FYSA funding is looking at, right? What are those gaps that exist? It's also a funding stream that does not have an upper age limit, as long as a young person experienced foster care or that orphan status or ward of the court after the age of 13 or older. And so that's really important to consider when thinking about what are financial resources available. Because young people might not be on this linear path because of the experience of foster care. That is not the true experience of any young person for many, many youth, but definitely can be the case for a youth with a foster care background. So I'll start with FYSA. There are also resources like the education training voucher, which is able to support young people in their educational post-secondary journeys. It can also help with some vocational pursuits as well, so that can be a really useful resource. Additionally, young people do qualify for TAP, they qualify for Pell, so that's funding that our young people are able to receive. Young people are also eligible for Excelsior scholarships. They do not always end up utilizing them if they're fully packaged in their financial aid, right? They might not always end up getting those dollars in their package. And then I would point out for our young people coming from the New York City region, there is a program called College Choice, which basically is this Administration for Children's Services saying, there are all these resources that exist. We want you to utilize all of them. And then if that does leave any gaps still, we're going to fill that in for everything from housing to also providing stipends to young people. And of course, young people with a foster care background, not all, but many, end up taking advantage of EOP. So it's a way that they're able to get those supports on campus. And I think while we're starting this conversation talking about some financial aid options and resources, it's also really important to realize that all of these options, as much as they are essential, only really work for our young people if it's also hands in hand with support, right? Support on campus, support in how do I navigate filling out those forms? How do I know where to go to if I do have an emergency and I need to access some FYSA funding for an emergency, right? So us being really knowledgeable on campuses about this information as well is just like, what are they? But hey, I know how to connect you to the right person for that is just as important as what are those financial aid resources.
Thank you, Deidra. Does anyone else want to, for the panelists, want to chime in, or now we can
Yeah,
set.
I can hop in here. One of the resources that I wanted to uplift is not necessarily specific to youth with a foster care background, but because young people with a foster care background tend to have that independent status, then they are typically awarded federal work study funding as well. And that is something that I was able to utilize while I was attending college, particularly at LaGuardia Community College, where you can still earn your money as you work, so you get the experience, and then you also get some of that like tuition and the cost of attendance shaved off. Another thing that I wanted to highlight is that specifically coming from the New York City area, individual agencies may have tuition assistance programs or like college educational programs that can help assist a young person with the cost of attending college, whether that's at a CUNY, whether that's at a private institution or at a SUNY. So I think it's also really important to just highlight the need for like that cross collaboration between staff and faculty on these campuses, as well as the provider agencies that the young people are coming from, so that they're able to know and make an informed decision about all their financial aid opportunities, as well as the requirements that are necessary to get the paperwork processed so that they can actually receive the funding.
Thank you. And one other thing I would just add myself would be for SUNY, we also are looking at how to address basic needs. And so we are looking whether if it's students who are facing housing insecurity, whether they are or not within the foster care background, also food insecurity as well. So that's another resource that, you might be privy to, or if not, you can definitely learn more on the SUNY website about our basic needs, platform and kind of what we're offering to students. So just to kind of segue to the next question, whoever would like to go, can you share if there were any, unexpected obstacles that you, or maybe if you know of, past foster care students that they face when transitioning into, or even just navigating higher education that, you or that they wish that they were better prepared for? And I guess the part two to that would be, how can colleges better understand these challenges?
I can start. I think for youth that are transitioning from high school to post-secondary, I think it goes back to what Deidra talked about. A lot of the students, they have aspirations to go on higher education, but they normally don't have the information. Like their caseworkers are, bombarded with an amount of, youth that they're working with, that they don't have time to sort of go over the entire college process. And if you ask, the research shows, you ask some of these youth that do make it to higher ed, how did you get the information? And they would say they were part of the Boys and Girls Club, they were part of the YMCA, right? They were part of some type of community outside of their school counselor at the high school, or they will tell you their school counselor didn't really do much for them, or they had some type of labeling that, that are surrounding, foster youth. So I would say just that stigma that's sort of attached to foster youth, we have to sort of try to help the people who are not informed to try to eliminate that, but really understand what that really is, right? Because when you say foster youth, most people don't know what that entails, right? They think of just kids going to live with foster parents. but they don't know that there's really three sides to the foster care system, right? You have the congregate side, you have the foster youth side, and then you have the kinship, right? When you go in and live with someone close to your family, right? And they're totally different. I'll speak from my personal experience. I was in the congregate side. So the congregate side is the group homes, right? And being in a group home and coming from a foster parent family, totally different. I had to rely on a lot of different resources and pretty much people from my neighborhood that, you know, I know that have gone on and at least tried college. So I had an idea of what the process was. But in terms of filling out the paperwork, I had to really navigate it myself. I think it has gotten better since I've gone through that process, but having the information readily available at the younger age, right? We usually, as a typical student in high school, they usually get the college process in their junior year. What I foster youth, we have to start priming them, thinking that if that's what they want to do, even if they don't choose to do it, give them the hope and believe that it's attainable, right? Because there's a lot of alumni who have journeyed through this process and are doing really well. And I think putting them in a position and in environments like this, right, where they can see, oh, wow, I can do this, right? And if you can get that, if you go and visit some of the group homes or go and visit some of the agencies and you partner up with them and start giving the information at that younger age, you're going to start to see the benefit as they start to walk through our doors. And when you get that application through the application process, and partnering up with some of these high school counselors, because as a school counselor and as a former high school counselor, I had the background from a foster youth and as an EOP director, right? But the students who are in my caseload had that benefit of me being a counselor. But I will tell you, some of the schools that, you know, in some of the rural and the areas, the counselors been there a long time. They may not understand EOP programs or may not have had students who may qualify for those programs, but those students are in their school, they're in their schools, they're in their buildings, right? So informing the high school and pretty much it's gonna come down to informing the masses, the stakeholders who can play a role from the younger level as they walk through and step onto the college campus. I know I said a lot, but it's going to take a village.
Definitely so. It definitely does take a village. Anybody else from the panel would like to chime in?
Yeah, I can definitely just add to Tony's point around the foster care experience looking differently. Just speaking like from my experience coming from like foster homes, and there's a lot of transitionings that are happening. Like sometimes young people are just moving in between homes. And if a young person is aging out of foster care in particular, then whether they're coming from like congregate care or foster care, something that is at the top of young people's mind is where am I going to stay? Where am I going to live? What is going to provide me the most stability? And a part of like my college journey, I initially applied to like SUNY, but there was a real gap in getting connected to like that EOP program. No one in my foster home like went to college or like assisted me with that process. So I had to figure a lot of it out on my own, and it felt like too much to do. And I was able to get that support from like some of my former like high school teachers and really just make that transition into a CUNY, so that I can still get in like at the right time of what I was thinking. But I think it's very important that there's that cross collaboration between provider agencies and campuses, and them having an awareness of what is a young person, what is a ward of the state, because that is like the term that is typically used, and what are resources that are available that can be passed through college campuses. So going back and forth to like the financial aid office, even at a CUNY, was still extremely exhausting, because I didn't know that there was so much legwork that had to be done and so much like paperwork that I needed that I didn't particularly have at the time. So just getting like situated and getting enrolled into school can be a time-consuming process, but when young people have someone to guide them along the way and they're aware of things that may be beneficial to their college journey, then it definitely makes the process feel a little bit more at ease. And it also just makes it feel more within a young person's reach. I think there are two pivotal moments in the college experience. For young people, it's one, that transition from high school into college, but then also that transition from college just into independence. And I think this is what really makes things challenging, but also just with the support attainable. Because a lot of the stability, even as we're talking about financial aid supports, all of that is tied to staying into college, which essentially means that if a young person is not in school, then they don't have anywhere else to go. So I knew that if my grades like fell below whatever the GPA requirement it was, then I would essentially lose all of the supports that I just need to like survive. So that is something that can really just add additional layers to the foster care experience. But the collaboration and the partnerships is something that I think will really lighten the load that young people they tend to carry on their own.
I'll just chime in and say that I think Tony and Dylan spoke so well to experiences I have seen young people navigate as when I was a case planner and working in an advocacy role alongside young people, and to speak to that part of how can colleges kind of better navigate those challenges. I think really having a culture that it is not just one individual's responsibility, but that it is the collective community's responsibility to be supporting students with a foster care background. I think something that is often not said is that we don't always know that a young person has a foster care background, right? We can talk about what all the resources are and the why, but going back to the stigma that Tony brought up, a young person might not always feel comfortable disclosing that. And so really considering that any student you're working with could have this experience, right? And that does bring up a unique set of needs, because there is this needing to do so much on your own. That is not necessarily the case if you're a student coming with a more quote unquote traditional like family setting, right? And so really being mindful that it is the people in the financial aid office, but also a professor considering like, what does that mean, right? And really thinking about, particularly in say like first year classes, what are the norms of navigating a higher education space, right? And building that into what does that look like, building to be a student. Those things are not necessarily a given, and a student might not have a family member or someone in their community to lean on. So really thinking of that as a collective responsibility and making that information that may support a young person in that transition not only available if they disclose this thing. They are probably going to be more comfortable to disclose that if the culture is already saying everyone is, aware that these can be experiences that students have and acting from that supportive standpoint. So that is just what I'll say. I know we have other questions, so I will close out there, Clarissa.
Oh, I think it's great, dialogue and just insights, and it really kind of speaks to that like, hidden curriculum that we sometimes hear about when students kind of start college, and whether they're first gen or they are a student who is from the foster care background and just not knowing what college brings and who to contact and the resources and just so many things, but it really speaks to that. So I think you all made a great point that really considering that any student who kind of comes to our door or we work with could really be at a loss of what is the next step to register, what is the next step for classes, or requesting tutoring support, whatever avenue it might be. So really just kind of keeping that top of mind. So thank you all for sharing that. And kind of transitioning into that, thinking about what are some types of support services, whether if it's academic, financial, mental health, so on and so forth, that you all recognize that are really most critical for students who are coming from foster care, or even if someone is an adult learner and maybe again came from that background, right? Because not all students are, coming straight from high school. And just what are some policies and procedures that colleges can institute to make it more of an inclusive and accommodating environment for foster care students.
I could start off. The first thing I would say, TCI, some type of TCI training. It doesn't have to be the full-fledged of TCI. And for those of you who don't know, it's the therapeutic crisis intervention, right? Most of the staff in the foster care agencies, they are aware of this. They have to go through this training. But I think it's important for the personnel that works in the college setting to be, even if they don't go through the training itself, but to really have some background knowledge, because that's important to know, right? And I think Clarissa, Deidra, you said that the student, you gotta assume that the student that's coming through your door had some type of trauma in their life, right? It can be the big T or it can be the small T, but at some point in life, they had to overcome some type of adversity, right? And if you go with that mindset, the compassion piece you can lead with compassion, right? And that's where the student can feel affirmed. They can feel welcome, right? You may not totally understand their situation, but when you lead with that approach, then you get the student to be like, okay, I think I feel comfortable enough to say, you know what? I was in the foster care system, right? And I go back to my high school days. If it wasn't for Miss Daniels to create that environment for me, it took me long enough. It was in my 11th grade when I outed myself. Up until that point, I never outed myself. But from having that space to be able to do that, it transcended my sort of confidence to be able to say, you know what, I'll be able to share my story. I didn't know this language now, but along the way I was strategically sharing my story, right? I didn't share every part of me, but I shared enough to get me to get my needs met, and to also build my sort of support network, right? And then once I build that support network, I tapped in. This is another term I didn't have back then with the social capital, right? The people that were in my network, I was able to tap into their social network, right? They may not have been able to help me directly, but they would say, you know what, I know this person, or I know that person. This person has this sort of experience, and they connected me with that person. And that's in itself can create such a movement. And if a college culture it's set up that way, right? It's not just for foster youth. If it's any student that you enroll that's in your incoming freshman class, right? That's going to set the tone when they come in. And if you look at the research, those students are graduating in 4, maybe 5.5 years, depending on their major. But they're going to be on the timeline, right? And they're going to feel connected. And then you won't have the I can't think of the term, but when those students return after you have a high retention rate, right? When the students are going to come back for their sophomore year, right? Those pieces, I know they may seem like, oh, of course we're doing that, but it has to be everyone, right? It can't just be the financial aid office. It can't just be resident life, right? It has to be the whole campus community that sort of lives and breathes this of the college community mission and vision of the institution.
Thank you for sharing that. And in the chat, I don't know if folks that saw that. I just want to, again, any opportunity we can give, students voices and experiences. One of the things that was shared was one of the biggest hurdles was just move-in day. I remember tapping over the agency logos before we pulled up to the dorms in a large blue van and asking for private meetings with FYSA, financial aid, so the entire line of students did not overhear that the student was was in foster care and was accompanied not by a parent, but by a social worker. So just those things that sometimes, maybe as administrators, we're not cognizant of. We're maybe doing our same systems and processes and just kind of going through and kind of getting things done. But just, sometimes I think, and then like it probably is what you was speaking about before, Tony, having some of those different trainings, some of those therapeutic crisis intervention, and just certain things that we do standard that we can be ever mindful, so that we can really change a student's experience, with just starting day one on their journey. So I just wanted to share that really quickly. And for the next question for you all I had was, Can you all share, how can colleges partner? Because we know, as you were saying, Tony, right, it takes a village. It's not just the college administrators, it's not just faculty, but how can colleges partner with, whether it's community agencies, external partners, to support students from the foster care background, but just being intentional about ensuring that their voice and their presence is heard?
Yeah. So I'll jump right in here. I think there are a few ways for colleges to really be able to partner with community organizations. There's space for partnership around advocacy, which, as you know, an advocacy alliance, FYSA is really happy to have a strong partnership with SUNY. That is making sure we're using the power that does exist in college institutions to say those resources are at the table for young people, but also to raise awareness, right, of what resources are available. So something we've talked about even in what would be inclusive policies are, how do you have a level of privacy? How do you create that culture around I can get resources, right? Something that we are advocating for right now is for there to be signage on that is required across all public institutions, that says what are financial aid resources for youth with a foster care background, right? That just being on signs that are visible, and other resources, right? We're talking about financial resources because that can get someone in the door, but other resources, that being visible, this is what you're eligible for, this is what is on campus. Any population that can be done for, but thinking about a population like youth with a foster care background, having that really visible, thinking about how you raise awareness and being present in advocacy, can be one way to really partner and support young people. And then the other piece that comes to mind, that we all as a panel have gotten to talk some together about, is really partnering with the folks who are working with the young person back at the agency, and to do that in a way where the young person is really leading, like, these are the people I'm comfortable with you talking to. So you have that permission, right? We know there are rules around confidentiality and who information is shared with, but there are the times where a young person might not be paying that bill directly, but there's someone at their agency who's helping them. So that person being looped into the conversation can be super helpful for that young person to really be able to navigate, even how do I show up on campus and know that is all going to be okay, that I can think about my education because I know that I have support from both the college and my agency in navigating these pieces behind the scenes that make me know I'm secure. And really having young people be the ones to say, these are the people at the agency that you can talk to. That part around we want to protect student information is so much there, but young people can still take that lead even as we are bringing in an agency or bringing in a partner. So listening to young people, who are the students, but really thinking about it from just awareness as well as how does this make the students' day-to-day life on campus that much easier.
Anybody else, whether Dylan or Tony, want to chime in?
I would say from the community partner, I think for me personally with my organizations, but I agree with Deidra working with the foster care agencies, because we know that they are that sort of population and the workers, right? There's a shortage, right? And so the needs, the foster youth are already at a disadvantage because they're not getting some of the resources that they are getting at the foster care agency. Me personally, I've been partnering up locally here in the Capital Region with a couple of local foster care agencies, and I've been providing training from my lived experience, and I've been working with the foster youth, helping them to think about like how to strategically share their story because they want to share it, but I coach them on how to do it, right? Because there's a method of doing it without suffering from compassion or sharing fatigue is what they call it, right? Because you can get all gung-ho, someone asks you to share your story, and as soon as that event over and you going back to your home or you're going back to your agency, you're going to start to think about, oh, did I share too much? How are these people going to view me the next time they see me, right? These are all real things that the foster youth, they think about. And I will tell you, the foster care agency are in dire need of the partnership because they can't do it all, right? If you go in and do a skills build for some of the foster youth and get them some of the stuff that they will need to get them through high school, right? You come in and do motivational talks and also work side by side to figure out what their needs are, what their goals are, right? And do some goal setting to get them to start thinking big and change their mindset. Because if you get them to change their mindset, it's not about if and when they go to, if they go to college, they want to go, is when they go, right? They're going to go to college or they're going to do something else, right? And they're not going to be imprisoned by their current realities and being in the foster care, right? We want to get them to be hopeful that this is not end or be all if you are foster youth, right? There are people who have navigated this. Let's bring that to them in their, in their organizations. And in community partners, they need to hear that. They need to see that, the community is invested in them, because here in the capital region, we are college town, right? We should be able to, partner at the minimum, at least know where they're located, to be able to, do financial aid workshop with some of the youth that are, college age students. If they're on the verge of getting to high school, what kind of high school workshops we can do, if they're juniors and sophomores years, to get them through high school, because we can sort of fill the back burner, because the foster youth in New York State, right? We look at the high school graduation rate, right? That's a sort of is an issue in itself. They're not graduating high school, so they can't even get all of the benefits that we're talking about, right? So it's a puzzle piece, right, that we need to navigate. But I think if we start in one area, we can then work backwards and working with the the community agencies to be able to sort of get the outcomes for foster youth to move in the right direction.
Thank you for sharing that, Tony. And I wanted to open it up if there were any questions that those who are here for the webinar, whether if you wanted to throw it within the chat or to come and kind of off mic and kind of share any like thoughts or just questions. Just wanted to allow that, and if not, then I'll kind of share some comments that are coming through the chat, and then or even ask an additional question to the panelists. So were there any questions that folks wanted to pose to the panelists? And maybe while you all are thinking of questions, I'll share with one of the things that was shared was that building healthy and supportive relationships with every student we engage with is everyone's responsibility in higher education. All students benefit from this form of connection. I have students of multiple ages who were abandoned by their families as youth for a diverse reasons. They are all at a disadvantage also. They don't even have the small or unstable support of the foster care system. So just us being, cognizant that, which we kind of hear that theme, that it's everyone's responsibility in your role, in your area, to just really, make those connections to help to, again, foster that sense of community for students. So I'm not seeing a question that's popping up right now. I have one more question.
I just wanted to add, I'm
Okay.
sorry,
No, go ahead.
just adding, it was just great with the comments and everything. And what I found from, this program and how it's grown, is that, sometime, students, they do want a space, to kind of communicate, their feelings or what they're going through with other students. So I know some campuses have found a way to create a space for students with a foster care background. And I think that that's something that can be cultivated and be very, very beneficial to the students. Talking about like that emotional capital and everything that Tony was talking about. And, some campuses have done that really strategically because some want to share and don't. But I think it's real important to, what I've found is really important to create that space for these students to kind of, communicate however they want to do it. Some do it more formally, some do it more informally. Some have Friendsgiving every year, just something to create a space for the students to kind of come together and, bond in some type of way.
Thank you for sharing that, Osei. For those who might not know, Osei was the former FYSA coordinator. So a question that came through was, how does having a criminal record prevent the financial assistance for college to take place for the foster care community? So anyone on the panel want to, tackle that question? Or I don't know if you all maybe supported students who, have that criminal record and how they're like navigating that entrance into college.
So I would say, having supported a young person navigating this, and Dylan, I saw you come off mute, so we'll leave space for anything you would like to add, that a lot of it really is depending on the age that happened, working with that young person around what are your options to be able to deal with that criminal record, to deal with whatever that may be. There are often times where a young person may have had some interaction with law enforcement and doesn't even know the full outcome of what that might have looked like, but was not, they had fear, which is very normal, and so did not acknowledge it. And so they may count themselves out of that process before it has even happened, right? So really working with young people around what are your options, what actually is your status in terms of a criminal offense. And often with young people, if they were at a younger age, there are ways to work with them, connecting them to resources and community as well that literally do work. That is to work with young people to get those charges dropped or to get those to be lesser offenses. Those are things that can be really helpful for young people. And then in terms of financial aid and the foster care community, this connection, to my knowledge, there are higher rates of like young people being in cross-system involvement. And so that really does play out then again in just what is that really opportunity and education gap that Tony was talking about before.
Yeah, I think like you nailed it, Deidra. You like really hit it right on the head. I was gonna say the same around. There is like crossover, like cross system between like foster care, juvenile justice, or foster care, maybe like the homeless population. But it may not always be the case. And because of that crossover, there's like advocacy work that's being led in those spaces as well. So it may be helpful to check out or reevaluate like what your campus is offering. I know that at John Jay, they work directly with Otisville prison in New York. So there may be some opportunities that vary depending on the campuses and depending on, as Deidra mentioned, the time that the offense occurred and things of that nature. But it is an emergency advocacy issue that we do see. So I just wanted to highlight that, but they're not technically tied in together as it relates to higher education because of how things just change.
I do want to just add, back in 21, 22, yeah. So any drug convictions, the FAFSA don't ask that question. They took it off. So I just want to put that out there. That was since changed. But if they had any criminal, it will come up. There are some barriers that, I mean, especially when it comes to scholarship, some of the scholarship committees may see that as a red flag. So I would say you want to prepare what some of the instances what may come about, right? But I don't want to count them out, right? And here's the reason why I don't want to count them out. There's an organization, I knew I was going to forget, but there's an organization here that has this roadmap to success, and they're doing some great work. And we're returning citizens, which is the name of people who are returning home, right? So they're doing some good work to get them employed, to get them jobs. Even SUNY Adirondack up in Queensbury, New York, is doing some work with returning citizens, getting them educated, right? So it's not end all be all, but here's where I want to, and this has not happened just here in New York. It's around the country, right? These colleges are partnering up and working with them so that when they return, they have some type of degree, right? They're going to hit some barriers, right? And I think in part of that conversation, it's like, okay, you got this degree, but just know that not everybody is going to see your degree equally, right? And that comes part of the preparation, right? It's not end all be all, because he's the person who started the program that I'm referring to, I can't think of his name, was at one time formerly incarcerated and came out, started a business, is doing really well. Now he's using his life experience to change, right? So, and he's partnering up with a lot of different schools and a lot of different, so it comes down to collaboration, right? And for some of you on this call, this may be the first time you hearing these specific, right? Unless you really read the research and ingrain in some of this research, or you connect it on doing the groundwork, you might not be, I don't say privy to this information. It's out there, but it's not something you'll read on a day-to-day like the newspaper, right? I think being informed and knowing that there are options is not end all be all, right? But we gotta work with the student that comes in front of us and treat them as an individual, and it's not a cookie cutter approach, right? It's there's a structure, but it's just a structure to guide to the process. But you work with the student and meet them where they are.
And I would just say real quick to that question in the chat on clarifying between drug conviction versus criminal records. What Tony's speaking to is that financial aid applications will ask about different types of offenses, and what the change in law basically said is that you cannot be penalized for financial aid because of a drug conviction. So that's really what Tony's speaking to. It can't be held against any student applying for aid.
Thank you, Deidra, for that. And I know we're getting close to time, but there's one question that I don't want to bypass. I think it might be coming from a student, but it was shared. Oops, sorry, my chat just scrolled away as I was looking at it. It was, what are some best practices when I'm assuming when students encounter tenured professors that are not choosing to take in a trauma-informed approach within the classroom to avoid these students reverting to those trauma-based responses?
So I think that there's two parts to that in my mind. There is what is the institutions to do about that, right? And I think there is a best practice of, you cannot force any faculty member to do something in a sense, right? But you can say, this is the expectation, and create culture shift by that becoming a requirement, that like Tony was talking to before. And then Osei actually brought up the fact that there are communities of young people, whether in a formal way or informal way, that exist. So really going back to community, right? Something that I love about getting to work with young people through FYSA is that they can come in a time that not just, hey, how do I get these resources? But I did have this experience sometime that wasn't so great, whether on a campus or out in some other part of the world. Here are now folks who speak the same language as me, understand those experiences, or are willing to listen, and really being able to have those spaces. And I think just really having it be public information. Where are those spaces on campus? Some of that you're going to learn from just being on campus, right? But going back to things of like, how do we have signage? How do we have awareness of things? How do we, small things such as like stickers that say, I am supportive of young people in this situation. I'm here to listen. Those things really let people be able to identify safe spaces without necessarily having to seek them out in a way of, I have to go then ask everyone, would you be supportive of me in this scenario? But really making that publicly available.
I would just add, this is where that trading comes back, right? When you train a young person, like, here are potential scenarios. Here's where the role play. Here's where the education. So that way, when they are faced with these, they're going to have the tools to be able to navigate, right? And get that. I've been in that position where, right, I shared, right, because I was that type of person that would share when I got to college, because I had comfort. Then I went to the professor and said, hey, this is what's happening. But some people are just set in their ways, right? But I was fortunate enough to have a HELP director that was my advocate, right? And everything I had, every trouble, I bounced it off her, and she went and spoke to the professor. She went and advocated for me. And you need to have people that are going to be able to advocate. And not just one person, right? Because there's many people on campus that might have relationships with that particular professor that may be able to sort of have that conversation that person may understand. But at the end of the day, people have their way of doing things, and as part of helping them foster you, helping them to understand that not everybody is going to understand their situation, and sometimes you have to you got to keep it moving, right? And you share that with them, and go back to like, this person is just going to be, this is a temporary person that's going to be here, right? It's not, you're going to get past this hurdle because they've been through a lot of hurdles. This is just one of those hurdles that you might need a little bit of support getting through, and see it as, all right, this is not going to stop you from what their ultimate goal is, right? But working with them to get them to see that in that mindset. And it comes down to a mindset shift.
Tony. I know we're actually a little bit past time. I know we had a slight delay, but any final takeaways? I did want to at least share the quote that you all had created to share with everyone here, but any last final thought from the panelists before we wrap up? Okay. So this the really quick, the quote that we wanted to share with you all is: empowering foster youth in higher education means providing not only knowledge, but also compassion. It is our responsibility as educators, or whatever in parentheses your role might be, to create environments where they are seen, heard, and supported, allowing them to thrive beyond the barriers that they have faced. And so with that, we'll, close. I'll stay on if there are any additional questions. And I'll also put back within the chat the FYSA one-pager. I know there was some question, or Foster Youth College Success Initiative. If there are any questions about that, but just want to thank you all for, joining us, and thank you all for the panelists for just your expertise, your time, and it's definitely been an awesome conversation.